want to talk a bit about some of the supply side issues. I mean, I spoke to one of your colleagues in Cannes about the whole open versus closed issue, and it was very much kind of like black and white sort of conversation. But sort of a lot of things have moved on since then, and it's become much more nuanced. So I want to talk about that because publishers are starting to think about this rather than they see the opportunity as a bigger one now, rather than this is the way it should be done and this is the way it used to be done. So let's just talk about that, and let's talk about how you're working around that at the minute.
Yeah. So I think the closed vocabulary is a little bit different. I think what a lot of people would think about is private marketplaces versus open marketplaces. So we kind of boil the world down to there are two basic things. There is maximizing competition, and there's doing it with quality. And I listened to the previous panel here. A lot of talk about quality, and we can hit on that in a bit. Yeah. But that's kind of a bedrock principle that you need. But when you think about competition, the point of competition is to get, if you're a seller, to get buyers to compete for whatever it is that you're selling in order for you to make as much money as possible. The trick is that you want to do that with the right degree of control. So think of it, if it's helpful, versus, instead of sort of open versus closed, we think about it, and it might be helpful to think about it more as a spectrum of degrees of control. So let's take a couple of examples. Let's say that you run 3 websites as part of your portfolio. And one of them is, pretty uptight. You've got real tight quality standards. Let's say it's in the finance segment. You've got a good amount of regulation about the kind of advertising that can appear there. Let's say another one is more of a user-generated site about gossip and entertainment. So you're going to have very different approaches to each of those. In the former site, tight on finance, you're probably going to want to be pretty tight about who can see and who can buy on that inventory. And even within that site, you may want to be even tighter on your homepage and section headers and a little bit looser kind of as you get deep into the content. And then on your gossip entertainment site, you may be like, hey, I'm going to be a little bit more open here. I wanted to open that up pretty much to the whole Megillah, let everybody participate there. And so it's about degrees of control, degrees over control of what's your minimum reserve price, what's your floor price, right? Who do you let to buy the inventory? What brands do you allow them to run? How much control do you want to exert over that? So it's not private or closed or open. It's, okay, what is the right amount of control that works for my business in this part of my business at this point in time? I'd say that just the last thing is, in general, we see that the more people open up and allow competition, the better their business runs, right? So, tying into these themes I know you've been talking about today about holistic yield management, allowing more competition generally is going to drive a better result, and then you can exert some control. So does that help a little bit?
Let's talk about, but how does that feed into the publisher approach, right? Like the standard way of selling inventory and buying inventory in this space is still IO based, right? Yeah. Despite the growth of programmatic, right? Yeah. The little lie is that they have this hand-sold programmatic, which is just we get an IO and we deliver it through our real-time ecosystem or through our bidder or whatever else it is, right? But effectively, publishers are selling on an IO basis, right? Now, if you introduce a holistic yield management piece, right? So let's say that every single impression in my ad server is up for grabs, right? I've got my direct sold, I've got my ad network, and then I've got my sort of outside sort of demand, right? So how does that fit into the way a publisher approaches an agency? Because it's quite interesting, because this is the kind of the evolution I'm seeing in the space, is that the publisher now has to go back to the agency. They sell it at a £20 CPM, right? But you can get 25, 20, 26 pounds CPM if you put it into holistic.
For some impressions.
For some impressions, yeah?
Right.
But you can't fulfill the entire campaign. You can't fill it 100% because you're getting better pricing outside. So how do you push against the agency like that?
Well,
particularly
there's a lot of topics right there.
Yeah.
So where to start? So one is just organizational. So you're exactly right. I used to work at Yahoo, and it was very much the classic model. What's happening now is that you're seeing the sales function move upstream to higher value kind of deals, and you're seeing ad ops really shift from classic trafficking, kind of sort of heavy lifting, to much more of a revenue optimization function as people are trying to work their way into these kinds of issues. So that's a really interesting organizational shift that's happening kind of right now, and it's been happening for probably a year, 2 years. Second thing is you got to think about a couple of things, right? First is your long-term relationship with your major buyers. So on the one hand, you may say, hey, I want to optimize short-term revenue and let everything compete with this campaign. On the other hand, you may say, look, that company has been paying me and is likely to continue to pay me, 30 to 40% of my revenue every quarter, so I want to keep them happy. So you've got to drill down and say, okay, are the campaigns pacing or not? That's the first question. Now, if they're pacing and there's room to optimize, then you have a different situation. You say, well, look, this campaign's pacing, and actually there's probably plenty of room before the end of the month or the end of the quarter, so I can introduce some more controlled competition, right? I can let real-time bidders, programmatic buyers, whatever you want to call them, come in and see if they can take some of those impressions at a higher rate, but not worry that I'm going to demolish the pacing and therefore be in a make-good situation with that publisher. So that's step one. There is a second step, though, which gets more subtle, which is you got to be careful, because if you commit to a campaign, you don't want to let the real-time market do too much cherry picking, because then what you get is a situation called adverse selection, which is when you buy on an IO, you're buying in bulk. You're buying a bundle. And your presumption is you're going to get a mixture of audience values in that bundle. You're going to get some really good stuff and some medium stuff and some, yeah, all right, I have to buy it because I'm buying the bundle. It's not great. If you let the real-time market buy too many of those, you're going to take the best stuff out and you're going to make the value of that overall campaign a little bit lower. Now, that's not going to change the outcome of that campaign. But if that happens again and again and again over time, that buyer's going to spend a little bit less on that campaign. So you've got to have someone or some ones in your RevOps function, right? You see how that's changing.
It's a level of sophistication.
It's a lot different way of thinking about it than just purely, okay, sell this first, let it run, and then fill in with whatever else I've got. It's beyond even, okay, can I compete when it's pacing? You got to think about the whole picture, right? And that's where we get to this sort of holistic yield management. Yeah. So you want to allow competition, but you got to think very carefully about the first and the second order impacts of that competition.
That seems like a level of sophistication I've not seen in any publisher. I mean, are you spending a lot of time sitting with publishers now talking about this stuff? And
More and more.
More and more.
Yeah, much more.
And the type of people now they're looking at, like, I know we talked before, but that sounds like, data people, like, in analysis.
Yeah, very much so. And I mean, programmatic, we've been doing this, 6 or so years?
7 years.
7 years, yeah.
Retire.
Yeah, I know. So, what you've seen, though, is I think, we run these events and retreats and so on. I've seen in the last 2 years what I call the first generation of sort of programmatic experts from publishers. These are often folks who have started out, obviously no one knew anything about it 5 or 6 years ago. None of us did, right? We're making this stuff up. But now they've maybe been through 1 or 2 companies, and they've learned about programmatic, and now they're at a new company, or maybe they've been at the same company for that half decade, and they are really dialed in. They are really expert. They're really thinking through all this stuff. Some of you are probably in the room. You know who I'm talking about. They're now participating in that conversation, and they're really thinking aggressively. Great example, header bidding.
Yeah.
Right? Header bidding is partly being made available by guys like us who thought it was a good idea pretty early, but also it's being driven by those smart folks at publishers who are like, hang on a minute, I'm running on a Google stack. I think that I can make more money by introducing competition to that Google stack. How do I do that? Oh, I can do this. Oh, can I do a bit more of it? And they're beginning to push the envelope in a way in which it didn't exist, even 2 years ago. And they are connected to each other, right? I know if there's a Slack group with about 65 folks who run this kind of stuff at publishers who are connected. They're telling each other what's going on. They're referencing the crap out of all the providers and working out what's the best thing and tuning all the time. So that's the kind of thing that's going on that's definitely different.
It is, we spoke about this briefly this morning, but is header bidding, it feels to me like having used DFP for my own projects that it's effectively just a hack, you know.
Oh,
Just
come on.
against the dynamic allocate. Well, dynamic allocation. But that's what I want to talk about. And how does it progress as a key piece of technology? How does it move forward to keeping Google honest into sort of the more interesting stuff like, you know, programmatic guaranteed, etc.
Well, just to quickly recap, probably most of you know, but header bidding is literally a tag that runs on the head of the page that allows another provider to see the impression first, apply a real-time bid. Usually some people apply an estimated bid, and then allow that to compete on a more level playing field within the construct of DFP and AdX. To go back to pretty much the first thing I said, the reason it's important is it's introducing competition. You know, AdX within DFP basically gets sort of first and last look. Now it kind of puts pressure on AdX. So just to give you an idea, publishers that do this with us, I can't speak for others, but they tend to see revenue rise in two ways. One, their AdX revenue goes up. Two, their revenue from us goes up. Take them together, they get a pretty juicy revenue increase. We've been doing it really getting on for 2 years. So certainly it's gotten more sophisticated in the way that we create the infrastructure on the back end with the publisher. We have automated scripts that do that and make it pretty straightforward to do that. But it is getting more sophisticated. I think people are realizing, do I want more than one of these? Right, an optimal setup that we will see, for example, is DFP AdX, us, Criteo, A9. That's a really good setup because you've got your kind of core Google stack, you've got a broad-based programmatic provider like us with a lot of demand, and you've got two real specialists, A9 and Criteo, that bring unique owned and operated demand. Put them all together, you can get a really nice outcome. So we're seeing people, optimize for that. We're also seeing them trialing, even more alternatives than that, which isn't necessarily going to be great, but people are trying a lot of things. And then to your last part of your question there, I think we're starting to see potential to feed in higher value PMP or programmatic guaranteed demand in through that implementation to compete with the higher value impressions in DoubleClick. So, a lot of these things start out as a little bit of a hack, frankly. Most things, actually, good things start out as a hack. And then when, a lot of things just die, we never hear about them. We certainly never talk about them on stages like this. But if they catch fire, then they turn into something real. And I think this is turning into something real. I'm just, from seeing the number of publishers who are adopting this and are driving great results, I know it's a real thing, and that is going to continue to evolve, I should say. Can't exactly predict where. There are interesting questions, though. So, for example, how does it apply in other environments, like in video? It's not yet clear how to apply it into a player. Some different circumstances there. So, there's going to be a few more chapters written in this to go.
So there's been a bit of a shift this year towards the supply side. I mean, a lot of vendors now are focusing on publishers. They seem to be coming after them more and more because they see it more as a sticky.
It's getting sexy.
Yeah, it's getting sexy, and publishers are getting sexy again.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, how do you, I'm a publisher, so what should I be expecting from my own vendors, my own sort of people I work with? And certainly in a programmatic way, I'm trying to think, what do I need to do to make these guys make me more money effectively?
Well, first thing you got to do is cut through the bullshit and work out if you can get a straight answer on a range of questions, and I'll run through those and see if you trust them.
Can I take notes?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. You might have. Yeah, you can take notes. So that sounds obvious, but it's really important. Our industry, like many industries, has got a lot of jargon, a lot of words, a lot of big claims. And most interestingly, the critical claim that most people make can't be proven until you're working with them, which is, I will deliver you more yield, more revenue. Right? You can show someone your UI, your reporting, a bunch of other things, but you can't show them the revenue till they actually start working with them. The good side is it's increasingly easy to work with people and try them out. So to run through, first you got to ask about revenue and how that's generated. And the most important thing to do there is listen to the answer and then ask for references. Right? The most important thing is who else are you working with, and talk to them. Right? And also get their list, but find out who they didn't tell you that they're working with and talk to them. Back channel references, much more important. Okay, second area, quality. All aspects of quality. Really the two main sides are traffic quality and ad quality. Now, traffic quality, the guys here, I think, did a great job of explaining why, as a publisher, it's important to you that your vendor does a great job with traffic quality, because you are part of a network, and that network derives a lot of value from its overall quality. So it's not just about you, it's about who else you are paired with in that particular marketplace. Ad quality, obviously important. What ads are going to run, what kind of processes and technologies are in place to catch that. When stuff gets messed up, as it always does, how quick is the company to respond? Can they show you the case volume and the case closure speed? That's the kind of thing you want to be looking for. Service model, right? How do they service you? Who's going to service the account? Is there a yield team on it? Are there people you can have that kind of in-depth conversation with? Access, can you meet the top guys? Can you talk to them? Are they going to be honest with you? And then just the sort of your feel, right? Do you like working with these people? Because they're going to be integral to your revenue. Pretty simple. So you better like working with them and believe they have something valuable to say.
So this is interesting, though, but do you think that for a successful supply side vendor, you have to have a service model? Because, you know, some vendors who work in that space, like if you're an AdSense customer, Google will never reply to your emails. I mean, like they've got 1 million customers. But I mean, like,
and that's a massive differentiator for, you know, the guys like us who are on the supply side, because, you know, people crave service. If you have a business and you're working with someone and you can't get an answer when you have a problem, that's a big problem, right? And so it's sort of a brain dead thing. But you know, Google isn't frankly that great at that, except for the very biggest customers. And so it creates an opportunity for other folks to go in there and say, look, we are going to spend the time with you. We are going to, you know, be on the end of the phone when you call. It's just a different model.
Do you think that's it's interesting, but do you think that's a big differentiator? I mean, and it applies to the agency side as well, because the agencies obviously want, you know, service as well, but that's a huge differentiator then, I think.
Well, look, revenue and quality are more important, ultimately. Like, you could have great service, but if you didn't have great revenue and shoddy quality, it wouldn't matter. Conversely, if you had great revenue and great quality and poor service, people would probably put up with the service, honestly. But if you can have all three, you're in a better position. And so it's real, but I don't want to, you know, I'll give you another example. Like, people talk about independence, right? So the fact someone like us, we don't have an owned and operated audience business. We're not like Google or Facebook. Is that important? Philosophically, yes, it is. What's really important about it, though, is that we only make money one way, which is when we make money for our publishing clients. That's it. There's no other agenda. Whereas you go to a Google or a Facebook or a Yahoo, and believe me, I used to run ad product at Yahoo. So you go through this like United Nations type product prioritization process that you can just imagine. It's like more people in here trying to negotiate what we're going to do. Hell on wheels. Who always won? Take a wild guess. It's the product priorities from the owned and operated properties, because that's where you make most of your net revenue. It's just inevitable. So, you know, when one of these very big platforms comes to you and says, I care very much about you, they do, but they don't care as much about you as their owned and operated business. They can't. They literally can't. The money is too powerful. So you're in a situation where you've got someone who's big and powerful and brings value, but you are second fiddle. It's inevitable. And that's real, because it infuses the DNA of how companies support their customers. And it's existential, right? There's no way around that.
It's funny, because I had a conversation with a publisher, and they're using the Facebook tool, the aggregated news tool. And I won't name the publisher, but they said that like they had a rev share of 70-30, and then 2 weeks or 2 months later, they just rang up and changed the rev share just like that. Like,
yeah, what you going to do?
Yeah, I mean, do you think that could be an issue, that if we that if publishers throw a lot in terms of sort of becoming almost like content slaves to these distribution platforms, that they will lose a lot of their own ability to monetize, or independent monetization?
Well, look, if you run any business, if you make cars, do you want to be dependent on the same supplier for all the parts of your car? Anyone? No, right? No, I mean, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the business is. You want to have some diversity in your providers, in your suppliers. And ideally, you want to have, not just in the past, but if you have tires that go into your car, probably want to have at least 2 guys who supply you with the tires, right? If one of them has a problem or one of them has a defect or supply chain issue, you're out, and you've only got one supplier, you're out of luck, right? So same thing. It's like those platforms have a real place and they're super powerful. But, you probably don't want to be too dependent on, it's like, Google a ways back where it was, driving a lot of your volume through the search traffic and potentially as your analytics engine and potentially as your monetization engine. It's like, well, okay, what happens if they change their policies? Take an example of where even they don't change a policy. Let's say the FTC or the government comes down with a new set of regulations about what those big guys can do with consumer data. Well, guess what? You're along for the ride. Like, whatever happens, they're going to change the policy because they have to, and it'll ripple across the whole distribution network. Guaranteed. Is that the best thing for you? Maybe not, but it doesn't really matter, right? So I think the reality is you do want to work with them because they bring a lot of value, but you don't want to work with just them. You want to complement them and work with others as well. So and the nice thing is it's not a zero-sum world. You don't have to pick one or the other. You can pick a couple of folks to work with and actually get the best out of everybody. And that, for example, keeps us honest, right? Keeps them honest. Everyone's competing. Back to that first principle, drive competition, right? Always be looking for ways to drive competition at every level in your business. Tim,
I think we're out of time here, so I want to thank you for your time.
Fast.
I know, we could talk all day here.
Yeah. Luckily for you, we won't.
A round of applause for Tim, please.
Right. Thanks very much.
And I think we're ready to go for a break, 20 minutes. Tim, thank you very much.